Я тебе мешаю?
Hello, everyone. This is FIDE Master Viktor Neustroyev. Thank you for joining this webinar. Today, we are going to observe the real value of pieces depending on a certain type of deposition. Well, what does it mean and what this webinar is about? Well, we all get used to learn that, well, let's say the bishop and the knight are 3 pawns. Rook is 5, queen is 9. But depending on the position, their value may change. And our task is to realize when one piece is stronger than usual, when it does make sense to sacrifice material in order to get a better real value comparing to the nominal value of pieces. Okay, fine. So we are waiting for more people to join us. By the way, first of all, we are going to cover the homework. Do you have any like questions? By the way, if you joined the webinar for the first time, can you please let me know what's your current ELO is? It can be FIDE rating, can be USCF rating, or just Chess or chess.com ELO. Okay, anyway, let's first start from the homework, from the homework that I gave you last time. Oh, let me open it just a sec. No, it's not this one. It's the homework for the course. There is a group, there are group lessons that I conduct on Mondays and Fridays, and that was the homework for them. Okay, so this. Devoted to the blockade of the pawn chain. Here, the first question was whether it's possible to play e5 or not for black in this position. And then the question was how to continue for black. So let me open it. So first, just a sec. Okay, once again, I hope you can see the screen. Here, the question is whether after queen g2, you can play e5 or not. What's your suggestion? Yeah, well, yes, you can. Well, actually, no, you cannot. If you decide to play e5 right away, they gonna react with this move, which becomes quite unpleasant. Well, take. Now the bishop has to move, and they play g6, opening the position, which definitely doesn't favor black at all. Well, maybe you can take there, but if so, they threaten to deliver checkmate. So after queen g2, e5 is not possible because of this idea. If it wasn't a checkmate, then you could capture only 3 and threaten this, but in this exact position, it is a checkmate. So actually, e5 is not playable. Then how to play if not e5? Well, b5. You can play b5. Looks like looks like a blunder, but if you then exchange this bishop, which no longer becomes the object of the attack because you exchange it. So let's say we swap the rooks, then a takes b5, and this position looks okay. They can play g5 still, for example, this. But we have enough defensive resources. So, for example, with our knights, we can definitely cover our king and block the enemy piece's activity. That's why that was the best way to play. So queen g2 is not playable. Now the second question. So the second was this position after queen g2 move. Okay, let me show you here. Okay, after queen g2. So here, how would you play in this position? Black is almost winning the game. Okay, bishop d2, rook d2, knight c4. Let me see. Bishop d2, rook takes. Well, I think you have to include this move too. Rook f1, queen f1, and then knight c4. Yes, it does make a lot of sense. Bishop c4, knight
Why do you
takes.
have to do the rook exchange first? I'm not saying it's wrong.
Well,
I'm just
no. Okay, so actually, yes, you can take on c4 right away, but I, for some reason, think that the rook exchange is more favorable. Now they can take. And now what? Rook d3? Well, yeah, black is winning, obviously. This pawn on h7 defends the king. It's not so dangerous. So queen g2. What are the suggestions? Bishop e8. What do you mean? Knight e8. Okay, I didn't get this point, but in the game, it was played knight c4 right away. Why so? So, well, let's say this, then you can do that, and you're threatening to take on e4. So, for example, let's say a queen move, then bishop takes e4, and how to play? Well, if knight takes e4, then you can continue with bishop e3. And if queen takes, you blunder here. If not, then rook takes e4. Maybe you can capture there, but then, well, just capture on c2 works. But I think there is a checkmate. Yeah, there is a checkmate like that, and then queen g3. And after they block, you take. Fine. So the move I wanted you to find was knight takes c4. Okay, let's now start with our topic today. And before we start, let me first, well, I have already did it, but let me show you the table which illustrates pieces value according to alpha 0. Okay, how can I make it? Oh, I can do it in a different way.
let me just add that if you look at Wikipedia on this article, there's many different valuations, but
Can you send us the link, please? Yeah,
okay.
so this is what I'm going to show you. So alpha 0 considers that a classical, this is just standard chess with with the rules that we all know. So here, the knight is 3 and 5. 305. Bishop is 3 and 1/3. The rook is stronger than 5. It's 563. And the queen is stronger than 9. And I think that alpha zero's value is very, very close to the real situation. But again, depending on the position, the queen can be 11 or even 14. The rook can be 3, but the bishop may become 5. Or in close positions, the knight can be like 5 too. Okay, so yeah, Peter, will you share the link with us? You can paste it in the chat. Anyway, so let's, yeah, thanks for the link. So this is standard, what we all remember, but you shouldn't trust it. You'd better trust to what AlphaZero shows you. So this is in the middle game. So knight and bishop are already stronger, and the queen is stronger. The queen is really good when the enemy king is weak. And these are alternatives. But again, you shouldn't fully trust them because these are real people who suggested. Well, I think Gary Kasparov is actually quite close. Well, but he overvalues the bishop. Oh, it's actually a rook. No, it's a rook. Yeah, this is AlphaZero. So the rook in the middle game, when it doesn't participate in the place of action, is not 5. It's definitely less. But once it becomes the end game, the rook can be even 6. Okay, let me illustrate it by the examples. And then we will continue talking about it too, because there is something I want to share with you first. Before we start. Okay.
What I find a little surprising is that the knight and the bishop in a lot of these systems isn't that different numerically, but it seems like, well, I definitely get it from you that often you want to trade a knight for a bishop, or getting the two bishops is really valued. I know that having the two bishops increases the value, but like, even my point is, even though the knight and the bishop aren't numerically that different, it seems like there's a strong encouragement to trade a knight for a bishop.
There's also an encouragement to play open style games. So it depends on the style of game you play.
Yeah, so it depends on the type of the position. In the open positions, we prefer to change the knights for the bishops in order to keep more bishops to take advantage of that fact that the position is open, and we can take advantage of the bishop's long reach and attack targets on one side on the board, on the other side of the board. Because when we play on both sides, the knight is very slow, and it definitely less valuable than the bishop. However, in the close position, the knights are preferable, but if you expect that the game is likely to get open soon, for example, when you exchange pieces and the game passes to the end game, the position is likely to be more open. So because everyone expects that the game is likely to end in the end game, every strong player, then he would still prefer to keep bishops and exchange the knights for the bishops. Because closer to the end game, the position is likely to get open and the bishop becomes better. But a lot of other factors have to be taken into the account. For example, if there are pawns that block the bishop, or if the bishop is attacking nothing, for example, it's located on the open diagonal, but there are no important squares on this diagonal, the knight is likely to be better than such a bishop. If the bishop is restricted with his own pawns, with the enemy pawns, it's also a bad bishop. That's why other factors have to be taken into account before you decide to do such exchange. But typically, yes, we would prefer to exchange the knight for the bishop. Fine. Let me show you this example. E5, so this is the so-called Leventhal variation. Well, knight c6 is kind of inaccuracy because it allows black to bring the pawn to the center. So in this position, knight b5, or if you want, you can play even knight b3. So knight c6, b takes c6, bishop c4, knight f6. And if you play knight c3, it's bishop b4, which is a bit unpleasant. That's why bishop g5, pinning this knight and preventing black from playing d5. Bishop e7, queen e2, putting some pressure on e5. And black decides to play d5 this time to open the position. What now? What do you think white should play here? Should they take? Should they retreat? Should they take on f6 first? Exchange pawns. Yeah, exchange pawns and then try to attack these pawns because well, black didn't finish their development. If black had already, let's say, the king castle, the rook on e8, and the bishop on b7, then yes, black would be definitely better with two strong pawns in the center. Ready to advance them. But because they have to make these moves, white has a chance to attack these pawns. So here, for example, well, queen e5 is not playable. They have to castle first, then they have to play knight c3 or even c4, knight d2, knight e4, something like that. Just let me show you why this pawn is not hanging. Maybe you can tell me why this pawn wasn't hanging. It's a poisoned pawn, and now black can take advantage of it. Well, bishop before check, yeah, and then pin is good if they block this check. But what if the king moves to d1? Then rook e8 doesn't allow you to win a queen. Okay, so John suggests rook e8, but rook e8, what if they just castle? Queen to d5, what do you mean? I don't see. Well, this is queen d5 move. Bishop a6, preventing from castling. Well, I'm sure that after bishop a6, black definitely has a compensation and is likely to play for a win, but there is a better way which allows you to win material right away. Knight g4 is interesting, but don't you just blunder there? So knight g4, bishop e7. You play rook e8. Well, if you take, then they take, and it's equal. After rook d8, it's equal. Well, I mean, black is a pawn down still. If you decide to play queen e5, they also block with a queen. If you play this move, it still doesn't look good. So knight g4 was interesting, but doesn't work. The best move is bishop d6. How does it work? Well, first they have to decide where to move their queen. And if they decide to move the queen on the e file, then after rook e8, bishop e3, and d4, they lose. If they decide to move to d4, c3, I'll show you. But what about this move? If so, we take the queen, they take our queen, but after bishop b2, we win a rook for free. Well, they can partially trap our bishop on by doing c3, so let me show you. Let's say this escapes, then we take, they do that, but we always can play d4 and get our bishop untrapped. Okay, bishop f6 doesn't work. If the queen retreats, let's say there, then how can you continue in this position? How can you win material? It's just two moves combination, which then allows you to win a rook. Okay, so bishop f5. Oh, bishop f5 is a nice idea, actually, with rook e8. Thanks, Alan. Alan, by the way, what's your rating? But you can do in a different order too. So this, they block, for example, you play bishop f5 and then you take on b2. But I also like this idea. So bishop f5, this, and you win the queen. But you win the queen for rook and bishop. Maybe instead you'd better just play this, and this. This is how you win a pawn, a back, and the rook. So c3, I don't think even it helps because you still have the idea of playing d4, or you have knight e4, and then you put pressure on c3 and win material back. Yeah. Okay, can you please let us know what's your rating? Okay, so the pawn was poisoned. Let's continue. Bishop f6 was played in the game instead of the exchange on d5. Bishop f6 and bishop b3. Castle. They castle. How would you play in this position? Okay, yeah, definitely a5. a5 attacks potentially traps the bishop. It also allows us to play bishop a6 move, so it's generally a helpful move because even if we don't win anything and play a4, we chase the bishop away and we may attack the pawn on b2. What do you think? There are two ways to play here that can allow white to save material. Well, there are two threats, this and that. Which move white should play in order to avoid material losses? What do you think? So, well, one is, oh, well, a3 doesn't make sense. If a3, it's just bishop a6 and you lose exchange. By the way, it's actually a good point. Here, the rook is not participating in the game yet. However, it's very easy to transpose, I mean, not to transpose, but to pass the game to the end game with extra exchange where the rook becomes more valuable. So that's why black would prefer to exchange their bishop for the rook, having in mind that in the end game, the rook will be much stronger than the bishop. At the moment, the rook is just a little stronger than bishop. Okay, fine. So what else? Can't white block with c4? Yes, definitely. Well, I think Johnny is suggests the best move. I didn't miss it, but I just wanted to discuss this move later. So rook d1, yes, rook d1 is the best move. Why so? Because after a4, there is a possibility of retreating with the bishop based on this pin. Well, I don't fully understand what you mean. d3 takes b5. Probably b3 takes b5, so you sacrifice. I don't understand the point of this move. Okay, you can take also, but if you take, well, this is what happened in the game. We will talk about it. Another possibility was c4 move. But then a4, bishop moves. And after this move, it's actually fine if you can do this. So there is no way to take advantage of this pin. So d takes c4, you can capture, maybe queen d4, but bishop d3 or even b3 works.
I guess I was kind of saying, I'm sorry to talk, but that it wasn't a threat with bishop 6 in some of these lines because he could block with c4. Like maybe if white did some stupid move like
So let's say
h3.
this, and then c4.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, but you trap the bishop then. So d4, knight d2. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think a3 is actually playable. Maybe a3, it makes sense to play this move first, and after that, then a4. Or even rook b8, which stops bishop here move, bishop c2, so bishop a2 is a must. Well, then it's basically the same position, and we keep the pawn on a5. Maybe it's a little better. Anyway, so a5 is very good, and they decided to take, c takes, and only then they played rook d1. This is what happened in the game. Okay, so John doesn't like d4. Let's talk about it, because it's a very important... where is it? So let's say it's a3 line, a3. Then we play bishop a6, c4, rook b8, no, rook b8, bishop a2, and then d4. So why? Because it makes the enemy, it closes the position, but makes the enemy pieces bad. Because what else you can do? Queen b6 in this position? Well, probably. D4 allows you to create a pass pawn. So, okay, what else? Well, let's say this move, queen b6, knight c3. You cannot keep this pawn. I mean, you can defend it like that, but then once the queen moves, you have to either capture or have to push anyway. With d4, you prevent knight c3, so they can develop their knight only to this position, after which you can take on b2 just. So this slows down his development. So probably queen here, you do queen b6, and again, your opponent is in trouble. Bishop e7. Think about doing these moves, and your bishop can get to the place of action from the other side. And that's why d4 provides you with better opportunities. Okay, fine. So let's continue with what happened in the game. C4. No, we don't take it, of course. Queen b6, bishop c2, bishop b7. Now this bishop becomes really strong. That's why they want to initiate a blockade. Rook e8, knight goes to e4. So we would love to keep a bishop pair, bishop d8, c5, queen c6, knight d6 is not playable. And because of that, they support the knight with f3 move. What would you suggest for black in this position? Of course, they set their pieces that way in order to play f5, but should they start with f5 or some preparation should be done first? Brian, do you mean rook e6? Ah, okay. Yeah, rook e6 makes sense, but where do you move this rook, and what if they play, let's say, this move? Rook g6? Well, maybe. Maybe rook g6. So rook e6 is one of the candidate moves. Oh, knight g5 cannot be played. There is a bishop guarding it. Bishop c7. Well, bishop c7, then knight g5, actually. That's why... Yeah, king h8. Well, the problem of knight d6 is still this fork, which allows white to capture on b7 with their knight and then initiate a blockade with their bishop or maybe the queen on e4. And with opposite colored bishops, it's likely to be a draw because black cannot attack the king with the dark squared bishop because of these pawns. So bishop e7 is the best. Well, bishop e8 is too passive. Bishop e7. Why? Well, this pawn is always poisoned. That's why you don't have to care about it. For example, if they play knight d2, opening the queen's attack, you can capture on c5 already with a bishop or with a queen, up to you. But you stopped this move. Now, if they do so, you win a pawn and just pass the game to the endgame. It's winning. Rook AC1 was played. Now, white decided to play F5. And F5 was actually a sacrifice. Maybe it's not the best move, but it's definitely a possible way to play. Well, how white can win exchange in this position? Who can tell me? So you mean bishop a4, but then queen takes e4? So bishop b3, king h8, knight d6. No, it fails. So it's definitely about these checks. Okay, so it's queen c4, after which the king moves, and bishop a4 winning exchange, but at the cost of a bishop. Well, here you may say, but why do we move the king? Why not to block with our queen? This is how we avoid this pin or skewer. Well, yes, but then they play bishop b3, and now we have to take, because if we decide to support with this move, they gonna play knight d6, breaking the connection. So queen takes, bishop c4, king h8, and then knight d6. And if we take, this position looks fine for black, for white, I mean, because they have a pass pawn, they can play d7, and they can invade our camp with bishop b5 and rook c7, so it's favorable for white. That's why here, assuming that there is a strong pawn center, black decides to sacrifice this exchange. Of course, he saw that skewer, but he sacrifices exchange in order to take advantage of his super bishop and his pawns in the center, which allow him to continue the attack. So queen g6, no, it's queen h6. Why queen h6? Well, probably because you don't fully understand the concept. If you play queen g6, then after bishop e8, you have to play with your queen or rook, which distracts your pieces from the attack. Let's say knight d6, bishop takes, take, maybe, then I don't know, queen takes and queen c7, they just exchange. Or if you decide to take on f3, just rook d2. And you cannot take this pawn, and this pawn becomes a real problem. So, queen h6, how does it work? Now, after bishop e8, what do we have? Two pieces are under attack, but yes, exactly. When you have your queen on h6, your queen is not hanging on g6, and because of that, you may not take this bishop, but you may take the knight, threatening to take there too. Well, because white requires tempi in order to save their bishop, you will advance your pawns and take advantage of the king's weakness, or just take advantage of far advanced pawns. But it's not the end. If they move the bishop, you take on f3, it's winning. So the best move is c6. How to continue? Queen e3. Well, if you do queen e3, king h1. And then e takes f3. Okay, so playable. Yes, it's playable, so let me make these moves on the board, but they have rook f1 in this position. So, and your bishop is immobilized. I mean, is out of the place of action. He cannot join this attack, so you can take there, but how to continue? You cannot invade the enemy camp. You have a check on d2, but they don't care. You can take on f1, but they take back, and this queen and this bishop are enough to protect c6. So queen e3 doesn't work so well. Bishop g5. Well, bishop g5, I think they just take and then promote. It's a bit slow. There is also rook takes bishop. Rook takes bishop. What do you mean? Rook e8 move. Rook e8 maybe. But then they capture here. You can take there, but after queen c6, you are in trouble. So maybe you can deliver a check. The king goes there. You can take there. But the problem is that the queen takes, and they still have a passed pawn, and this king is relatively safe. So you have to take on f3 right away, and there is a difference compared to queen e3, a line that Brian suggested. Why? Because if this time they take, then you play so. And here they have to move. The rook is not on f1. So if you remember, because of early queen e3 move, I decided to not take this bishop, but played rook f1 to support the position. However, this time f takes g2 wins the game. You can invade the enemy camp with your rook, and then, well, it's a simple checkmate like that. Or if the king goes there, it's, let's say, rook e2, and then it's a simple checkmate. That's why they have to defend the second rank with this move. And now you can play queen e3. This was the best option. And this is how white could still save the game. For example, if f takes g2, the queen can go back and gain a tempo. If, what else? Bishop a6, then queen a6. So bishop c5, d3 is too slow because they have queen f1. So yeah, Peter, this is a Spanish location, notation. Rook means T, torre. A means bishop, alfil. But at the same time, there are mistakes in this notation, so I don't fully understand it. So bishop a5, what does it mean? Bishop a6, probably. This is a5 square. None of the bishops can go there. Okay, so queen a3, rook f2 was the move that could save the game, but king h1 was played. How to continue? Should we take? But then they take with their rook, and the king is relatively safe because we cannot take advantage of this, of the control of this diagonal. F2, threatening queen e1. Yeah, f2 makes sense, rook f1, and well, queen e1 probably doesn't make much sense here. But you can continue with d3, I think. And if they take, you take the rook. Well, it should be a winning position because even if they promote, you can promote 2 because after the exchange, you promote with checkmate. Right? So maybe it was too fast. So you do this. How do they play? Well, okay, so you do this. If they take, you can take there. Now, if they capture, You continue with rook e8 and stop the pawn. If they decide to promote, then you can promote. And very nice position. So if queen c1, you take on c1, threatening to take on f1. And if rook takes f1, f1 equals queen leads to checkmate. Okay, fine. So f2 possible. But they played a better move. They played bishop c8, just saving the bishop and trying to join to help the attack from the other side with this bishop. So you look at these rooks and look at this bishop. Having the king on h1, the light squared bishop is definitely more valuable than a rook. That's why black is definitely ahead, and they have a lot of material here. A lot of material advantage, but nominally it's +1. So Lichess shows that it's rook versus bishop and pawn, which means +1. However, it's actually -3, which means that black is 3 pawns ahead. How? Well, I think the bishop is stronger than the rook. Well, maybe this rook. The king is so weak, that's why black can coordinate their queen and the light squared bishop in order to succeed with a mating combination. And these pawns, of course, help a lot. Why? First of all, if you pass the game to the end game, you can just advance the pawns and win because of that. Second, because they stop any possibilities of a counterattack or any possibilities of defensive play if the queen decides to go to the king side. So the only way for the queen is now queen f1. But they played bishop d7 to neutralize the bishop. However, f2, threatening with queen e1. Rook f1, d3. Rook c3, take, and just e4, defending there. So this is not a big issue. So even if queen c8 is played, it's possible to blockade with the bishop. Queen c4 was played. And how would you play here? Yeah, instead of bishop c8, it was also possible to start with d3. Okay, so John suggests queen e2. Well, yes, it works, but queen e1 is several times better. Why is it so better? Well, it's better because if you do this, he does that, you don't have this move because your queen is hanging. But if you do queen e1, after rook c1, d2 works perfectly well. So now what? If they decide to move the rook, you can just, well, if here, then you can, yeah, you can continue with e3 and d2. If he decides to move the rook there, you can still do the same thing. In the game, it was queen c5, but, oh, well, we need to save the rook. Rook d1, and just e3. Finally, it was queen c3 played. Now, what would you suggest? Well, no, you don't have any support here, so that's why if you capture, then you cannot play f1 right away. But actually, you can play this, and then e2, and then f1 with checkmate. This is how the game ended. Well, you could play e2 instead in this position. That would work too, but then this. And here you have to play accurately. You have to capture with this pawn. Maybe there is no big difference. Maybe it's better to take with the other one. Yeah, with this. If they take there, you play f1 and win the game. If they do this move, then you can capture, they capture, then rook f8. And king g1 doesn't help. So h3 or maybe g4, rook f1. Well, it's over. Then you win a rook. Okay, fine. So e2 works too. Fine. So what can we say? In this position, the queen with 3 pawns was stronger than a queen and a rook. But these pawns were not so far advanced. However, because of the king's position and the ability of this bishop to join the attack using the light squares, playing these moves, or even capturing and moving to h3, white had to let black to advance the pawns. And because of that, their position was better. So look at this critical moment once again after bishop a4 was played. Well, it looks like it was a blunder, but actually it was a sacrifice because this rook on e8 didn't participate in the game, and it was a very good idea to exchange that rook for the knight and at the same time threaten to take the pawn on f3 in order to make the enemy king's position weaker. Fine, let's continue. Oh, this is the end game. What you should remember? Well, depending on the concrete position or a type of the position, the value of a piece changes. For example, the knight can jump and deliver forks that is easy to blunder, especially if you're low on time. So for example, in the end game, if you are completely winning and you decide which piece to eliminate, choose the knight, because if you may blunder a knight fork. The rook is quite dangerous when the lines are open and the rook invades the enemy camp, for example. For example, if the rook is fighting against 2 connected pass pawns, then there is a problem. It can hardly fight against it, especially if they are supported with a minor piece. The bishop is good because of its long reach. However, once it gets restricted, it becomes almost useless. Well, there is even an expression in chess. So people say big pawn, meaning the bishop, which is blocked by a pawn chain. The queen is the strongest piece usually, but the queen is strong once it fights against discoordinated enemy pieces, or for example, when the queen is attacking the king or just delivering some checks, which later may result into a fork and material wins. However, the queen is often afraid of the attack of less valuable pieces, such as minor pieces and pawns. Also the king, so we cannot evaluate the king's value, but what can I say that once it's the opening or the middle game, we have to take care about the king and defend it. But once it comes to the end game, the king's power is as strong as the rook, so it defends all the squares around it and should participate in the game. Yeah, around 5 points. Okay, now let's talk about this position. Well, white has some material advantage. Or maybe it's better to say black has. Well, white captures on h3 and then white has material advantage, right? Because 2 minor pieces versus rook and pawn. But knight h3 is a kind of inaccuracy. Instead, they'd better play this move, attacking c5. If we try to defend it, then with g4 we lose that pawn. g4 stops f5, so it paralyzes the king. If we do rook c8, then they can capture on a4, or maybe they first blockade with this and then try to find try to play g4. Okay, but
Could you please show why the knight taking the pawn isn't ideal, unless you were just about to?
this,
Yeah.
yeah, this is what we are going to continue with. So this is what was played in the game. But the problem of this move is that the knight is on one side of the board and cannot join the place of action, which is likely to take place somewhere here. So 2 tempi are required to bring the knight, and even maybe 2 tempi is not enough. Well, what do you think? Here, for knight h3, black prepared a very nice tactical strike that I want you to find. Well, my students often ask me regarding rook versus 2 minor pieces. Who is better and why? So some people consider rook and pawn to be equal to 2 minor pieces. So very often they sacrifice 2 minor pieces on f7 in the very beginning of the game. I always recommend not playing like that because in the opening stage of the game, the pieces which are already developed are definitely stronger than rook. However, in the end game, rook and the passed pawn can become stronger than 2 minor pieces. And this is the exact case. Well, okay, so let's start. Brian suggests rook h8. Well, interesting, but I don't think it works because of king g2. What else? Bishop. Pawn takes b3 and then a rook a2. But what's the point? Just this move. So a takes b3, a takes b3, rook a3. But then not bishop c2, but bishop c4. f5 is interesting. So f5 is a natural move, but actually it's c4 can be played. How does it work? Well, you may just consider it as a blunder, but let's discuss. Well, which moves we should analyze here? Only this. Well, doing something like that doesn't make much sense because just the bishop is hanging. So they should take. If they capture with the pawn, then rook b8 and we have a pass pawn which will distract this bishop and we get a chance to win the game. So that's why, yeah, only bishop takes c4 makes sense. Rook c8. So the bishop is under attack, so b takes a4 is not playable. If they decide to play this move, then well, bringing the knight looks like a good idea, right? But no, it fails. How does it fail? Yes, it fails because of rook takes c4, b takes c4, and then b3. So here you may say, okay, what's going on? It's possible to stop this pawn with knight d3. Well, the b pawn, yes, but not the a pawn. Now knight d3, a2, and you cannot prevent black from promotion. That's why bishop d3 was played. Now, how to continue? What do you think? So, invading the enemy camp. Well, yes, there is nothing wrong with rook c3, actually, but then king e2. And then you have to play a proper move. No, well, Brian, if you do this, you lose your last chance to win the game. So this, rook takes, and now they can bring the knight, and because the king is close, they can stop your pawn. Well, f5, I don't think f5 makes sense. The best move is a3. Yes, we should keep the a pawn. How? Because now a2 becomes such a weakness, so we can capture it, and nothing can stop it. And then a3 becomes a passed pawn on the edge of the board, and well, none of the pieces can stop it. Maybe the bishop only. Well, we'll see how it goes. King goes to e3. The king comes closer, rook c1. Knight f4, rook a1. Knight d5, threatening b4, but it's fine. Rook a2. Knight takes, rook h2. Now we are always threatening with this move. So if they play something random, then rook a2, and it's likely to be a winning position. That's why bishop e2, to not let us playing this move. Rook h3, king f2, and now f5. So such a strategy like rook h8 doesn't work because they can build a fortress. And now in order to attack, we probably have to do this, but then just king e2 is fine. If we decide to go that way, king d3, or just king e3. And after this move, it's this. So that's why f5, in order to bring our king to the game. Knight a2, f4. Why? To take advantage of a pin. G takes, rook takes there, bishop c4, rook h3 back, threatening with this move. So bishop f1, check, he blocks. And now we definitely have to use our king. So f4 was played, we gained this pawn, now we have a pass pawn, and white doesn't. We can win only if we capture this pawn, which is actually much easier this time. Why? This pawn is on the dark square. The knight is too far to defend it. So if we can find a way of how to attack it twice with rook h4 and king on f5, we can just capture this pawn for free. So king f6, bishop g3. I mean, king g3, rook goes to h5, bishop f1, this, and this. And this is where it was still possible to save the game by doing this move. How does it work? Rook d2, knight c3. And if a2 in this position, so this, and then with king g4, well, they would struggle, but probably still could make a draw. So for example, rook a4, just move the bishop. So keep moving the bishop, like h7 and b1. I don't see the way to progress, but of course, black would play for win, trying to do a kind of a side maneuver, combining it with the ideas of attacking the bishop. So that was the best way, but they played bishop a6, thinking that there is no big difference where to move their bishop. Rook d2, bishop c4, and rook d4. Now, after the bishop moves, well, it cannot move to b3. It has to move to b5. It's just king f5, and it's lost. So there is no way to chase the king away. There is no way to protect the pawn. And after black captures it, he starts advancing the f pawn, distracting enemy pieces. Okay, what about this move? Now, if king f5, it's possible to play bishop c8. What do you think about this position? Wasn't it a possibility for white to save the game? Yeah, the king does go to e3. Exactly, that's right. The king may not even go to a3, but may go there to attack this knight. Yeah, exactly. So, fine. Look at this position. This rook is stronger. The rook and the pawn are stronger than two minor pieces. However, it was possible to blockade and defend this knight on a2. But they are still stronger because the knight has to stay there and the rook will combine attacking opportunities with some ideas of checks or pins. And, well, so the rook is also attacking this pawn, which means that the king cannot go to that side to help the knight to defend the position. If we, for example, exchange these pawns and remove them from the board, it is a draw. But with extra pawn, it's completely winning. So that's why this is what you should remember. When it's the middle game, two minor pieces are better than the rook. But if it's the end game, a rook and the passed pawn can be stronger than two minor pieces. Well, if it was possible to have, let's say, the pawn on d3, it would be a fortress. but in such a case, it would be a different material ratio, like pawn, 2 minor pieces versus rook and a pawn. Okay, fine. Let's continue. The next game example. Well, in this was a very risky opening that I don't recommend you doing its bishop b4, after which black has to play accurately. Knight goes to d5 to add pressure, and it's queen g4, attacking g7. So if you play knight c3, it's this. Maybe knight goes back, but then c3. And you have this and this hanging. Moreover, this doesn't help much because after bishop h6, the rook is hanging with checkmate. Well, queen g7, rook here. Maybe you should play like that. But then you still lose because after a3, the bishop has to go back, after which white can capture that knight on c3. If bishop goes there, then it's b4. Oh, no, then it should be something else. It's bishop h6. It's bishop h6 here. Queen e7 and not b4, but knight b3, knight b3. So once the knight moves, it's knight takes a5. If the bishop moves, then we can take on f8 and we can take on c3. I think we just take on c3 first, and later we can capture on f8 because this rook has no moves. So castle, but bishop h6. And black decides to sacrifice the exchange, having in mind that there are pieces that are already developed, can be stronger than that rook that they sacrificed. Queen g3. Knight c6. So three minor pieces participate in the game. Well, queen g3 was important. It protects here and here. So knight c6. And white decides to take. Here, white has to play aggressively. What would you suggest for white? Oh, yeah, Peter. So two connected pass pawns on the 6th or the 3rd rank, depending on the color you play, are stronger than a rook. That's right. Because the rook cannot stop them. But the king can. Well, it's white to move. White should play aggressively. So the last move was b takes c6. A3. This is what was played in the game. So it's not the best way. Here, white should play aggressively, otherwise they may lose their advantage. So what they should do is this. So maybe this, castle queen side. Knight c3, b takes c3, well, bishop e3, nobody cares. After bishop d3, the king is safe, but the attack on the king side is strong. Well, doing this is pretty much the same. But they played a3, which is a logical move. However, white is not better anymore. Now this is a problem. Knight takes d5, c takes d5, and queen c3, defending and attacking. So, what can you say about this position? Why am I saying that white is no longer better? So it's approximately equal position. Why so? Who can answer such a question? So is it because of the pawn structure? Well, yeah, I would say yes. The pawn structure makes sense. So if, for example, white had a pawn on d4, let's say here, let's say the a pawn was on d4 and this pawn was on c3, I would say white is better. So the pawn structure matters. So this bishop is bad. Well, not so bad, actually. No castle. I don't think it's important. King and rook on dark squares. I don't think it's important neither. Queen h5. You mean queen h6? White king is still exposed with queens on the board. No, actually, you all are mistaken. Well, the pawn structure is such a factor, but it's not the main factor. So the problem of the white's position is that they cannot get their rooks involved. And black may operate through the dark squares. For example, undermining with d6. Well, not right now, of course, the bishop is hanging, but black is going to undermine and take advantage of their bishop pair, as well as take advantage of the light squares being weakened. Maybe, well, maybe there is no possibility of attacking the king, but advancing the pawns and supporting them with bishops will make a lot of sense, because white cannot initiate the blockade of these pawns if d6 is exchanged. If e5 is exchanged for the d6 pawn, then we can just advance them and with our bishops attack these squares that our opponent is likely to use to initiate the blockade. Well, if, let's say, in this game you decide to play something else, let's say you play bishop b6, then you try to play bishop b7, a5, you are likely to lose the game. So you should understand that your bishop is stronger than the enemy rook only if you know how to fully realize this superiority. So here, it only works once you open the position and take advantage of the dark squares, advancing your pawns. So actually bishop b6 was played. No, again, yeah, probably it's possible, but queen d8, d6 makes sense too. Bishop b6, bishop d3, queen g7. Queen g7 creates a threat of d4 and queen e5. I don't think they can do anything with it. So they castled. Now, if d4 is played, they can defend with queen. Okay, so it's too early for d4. Let's play bishop b7. If you play f4, then you cannot castle. And castling to the queen side is too risky, especially because of bishop a3. So castle is a must, then rook a e1 defending the pawn on a5, but now d6. So because d4 is coming, queen e1, a prophylaxis, d takes a5, queen takes a5, queen takes a5, rook a5. So looks like white is better, white has material, but actually black is about to advance the pawns.
Could you go over e5 takes d6 in that line?
I don't think I should. So
Okay.
there is a queen hanging.
Oh,
Okay, so this rook retreats and rook c8, rook d1. What black should do? Advancing their pawns. That's right. So e5. However, well, there is a chance for white even to play for a win in this position. But, well, this is definitely a problem. Not at the moment, but let's say bishop b2 and then e4. So what white should do? C4. Interesting. Well, I don't think c4 works. What about d takes c4? You lose another pawn, and this becomes a passed pawn. Bishop b5. Yes, but what's the purpose of bishop b5? So let's say I just play a random move, and then white can play for win in case if they sacrifice material back and then invade our camp. And then this d4 is a weakness. The bishop is, well, not bad, but at the same time, not so good. This move, then b5, and the king comes closer, and white is winning. So this is what can happen. They have to sacrifice exchange back because there is no better way to fight against this bishop combined with the pawn's activity. So this is an example where the bishop is stronger. It supports the pawn and attacks the squares that usually a chess player may use in order to initiate a blockade. That's why actually king f8. And now rook d4, rook d4 doesn't look so good. It's still playable, and white can draw the game after that. So the material is equal. Well, this is a weakness, this is a weakness. Well, maybe you can play bishop b2 in this position. Then c4, c4 with a tempo, right? Bishop a3 and c takes d5. You take there, but now, well, d5 is a dangerous pawn and just rook a5. No, this is where white is much, much better. Why? Because more files are open, and now rook's activity is stronger than the bishop's activity. So king f1 was played in the game. Bishop c3, so not bishop b2 because of c4. But bishop c3, blockading and threatening with e4. That's why f3, but it doesn't stop. Now we can play e4 with the help of the f5. Bishop b5. Let's prepare by moving the king. So you see, king f6. So they want to sacrifice material and capture the pawn. But with king f6, we defended, and now this material sacrifice doesn't make much sense. Now d4, and they have no better option but to sacrifice exchange anyway. For example, let's say rook e2, a6, bishop here, e4, so it's a disaster. Well, rook g3, let's say. I think this move. What else? Maybe just bishop d5 first to play this. Bishop b3, let's say. Bishop takes, pawn takes this. No, not this move first. Then bishop d2 and either this or d3. This is how black wins. Okay, fine. So they sacrifice material back, d takes c3, but now it's a favorable position for black. Well, the white can still fight for a draw, but only for a draw. Well, probably rook d8 or something like that, but this is where they played this move, and that was completely losing idea because this pawn is now weakness. This is a far advanced pawn. So, well, rook d8 still offered drawing chances, but rook d7, no. f4, fixing the pawns on the light squares. b5, which restricts the bishop, but then bishop d5. So the bishop centralization decides the game because it's even possible to play this and then promote. Bishop c6, bishop c4 check. Okay, even not bishop b3 because of bishop e4. Actually, it's winning. You can take this pawn. Yes, bishop b3 was a very good move. It's probably the best. But in the game, it was this, and black simply brings his king to the queen side in order to capture these pawns. So h5, bishop e8, bishop here. So they can take this pawn, but we take these two. Bishop e8. Then we first continue with king e3. And on the next move, we take there. Or if, let's say, this, then king goes there. King d1. Fine. Just it's just a Zugzwang. Bishop b7. No, not bishop b7. Bishop c4, bishop e8. And king b1. Ah, bishop d3. Bishop, no, not king b1 with bishop b3 idea. But actually, you don't need it. You can play bishop d3 or bishop b3. Bishop d3 is better because it stops bishop g6. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so king e2 was played in the game. Well, if you take, you may blunder b6. g4, f takes, h takes, king moves, and just bishop e4. And it's time to resign. Bishop d7 trying to win this pawn, but the pawn on the c file is much more important. So bishop a4, taking there and promoting, because they have to keep an eye on the c pawn. So the next move should be, I don't know, king e2, then you just take. It's definitely winning. So let's take a look at that position with the bishop on d4. This. So this bishop is stronger because of his ability to prevent any blockade that white can initiate in order to stop our pawns. That's why if white wants to not lose the game, he has to sacrifice exchange back, which he did, but then made another mistake. Okay, fine. So this is a very nice example. White has extra exchange, so rook versus bishop, but their pawns require to be protected. That's why we cannot say that white has advantage in this position. It's definitely a full compensation. That's why white decides to sacrifice on d5 in order to then win this bishop by doing something like that, either rook a5 or g4. So a5, g4. Well, rook a5 would be better. King c6 and then g4. Knight takes there. You can play g5, forcing the rook to move. And after that, this pawn dies, and you can have some winning chances because of this. But it's likely to be a draw. So, for example, this. And if rook f7, you even lose on g5. So after that, you have probably to make a king move. Well, then this, and then knight e4 is a problem. Okay, so yes, it's very hard to make moves, but they play g4, fine. What would you suggest for black? Let's actually flip the board.
Where did white sacrifice a piece?
White sacrificed the piece for the central pawn in order to win that bishop on e5. So it was technically not a sacrifice, but exchange. So now they can take on f5, but it's black to move. So rook e6. No, rook e6 doesn't make sense. Rook e6, it's rook f5. So you move the king. If here it's d5. So here, but then you lose after the exchange, you lose the pawn there. So it's completely losing. Yeah, king d6, I think, is the best move, right? King d6, and how does it work? So rook f5, pawn takes, and then you can play b4. And it's possible to draw the game here. Black wants to play for a win, and he decides to sacrifice on c3. Now taking on e5 doesn't look good. It's better to take this, because this one is still pinned. So rook c3 and b4. Rook goes there, and it's actually extra rook. But, well, you have to play a4, they would capture, and then there is a chance to get the pawn to the third rank, after which these two pawns will cost more than a rook. But black decided to play even another move, bishop c2, sacrificing the rook. So now it's bishop versus two rooks. However, they hoped to promote these pawns. Actually, two rooks are stronger. And if white plays properly, he should win. So rook f6, b3. How to play? Rook e1. What's the purpose of rook e1? Because you also lose on d4. So let's say rook e1, they continue with this move, b2. So here white has two plans, which may allow them to play for a win. Well, rook takes f7. Okay, rook takes f7, then black plays b2. How to continue? Rook b7. Rook b6, you mean? Okay. Okay, fine. So rook b6, rook b6 at c3 then. Doing rook f7 makes sense, but look at the position. Here, actually, it's not bishop versus two rooks. It's bishop, king, two pawns versus two rooks. And as we know, the king's power is as strong as a rook, so it's 5. So if you calculate, you see that there is 5, 3, 2, so 10, and these are 5, 2. I mean, both are 5, so it's equal, 10 versus 10. Once the pawn reaches c3, then black is likely to have advantage. So what white should do? They should also bring their king to the game, king f2. Now what? If b2, it's completely fine, king e3, and after this move, it's completely fine to sacrifice there and capture this pawn on a5. Okay, maybe it's not b2, but c3. King e3. Now what? Still this, right? But you have this. Now if you promote, it's basically the same position. You can try this, but then your king becomes in danger. So, for example, if they bring the rook to c5, it is a checkmate. So they can do this, this, and this, which you cannot stop. Well, you can only stop it with b1. No, rook f d6. No, you cannot stop it even with b1. Or after a4, it's possible to just play g5. And if, let's say, a3, well, then can't you play g6? No, I think you cannot play g6. So here you have to bring your rook and look for a checkmate. So bringing the king would allow you to save this pawn, as well as create some mating opportunities to checkmate the king. But playing without the king doesn't mean that white has advantage. And they played rook a6 with the idea to locate the rook behind the pawn, but this pawn wasn't important. These pawns are more important. So king d4, rook a5, b2, rook b5, c3. Now rook b8. Oh, why rook b8? Well, that was a kind of a threat. Because after rook d1, it's c2. So rook b8, bishop d3 anyway, rook a1, and Well, c2 is not playable because it's a pawn blunder, just king c5. Well, with these ideas. King f2, bishop b5. Rook a5 check. It seems that black wins more material. I mean, white wins material. King d4, rook takes. But after c2, there is a queen on the board, which they cannot stop. And then this queen can deliver a perpetual check, and this is where the game ended in a draw. So black managed to save their game because of the passed pawns, and because of the fact that they were playing with more pieces, not just bishop, but they also took advantage of the fact that their king was active enough. Okay. Fine. So, well, what does it mean? It means that you shouldn't only compare what you sacrifice, I mean, the material on the board, but you should decide whether your piece's coordination also matters. For example, if you see that at the moment you have more pieces participating in the place of action, then some material sacrifices are fine, even like it was here. Okay, so we are not done. We're going to continue. We have one more game left, and then I will send you the homework. However, I want to remind you that if you like the webinars, you can share them with your friends, but you can also support by sending a donation using this link. Let me copy it to the chat. So it's very simple. You click the button. Then you enter the amount you want to donate, so like 10 or 20 or like any amount you want. Then you click PayPal button. It redirects you to your PayPal account. You have to enter, and then once you then you can send the payment directly to my account. So I would appreciate any support, especially because I use well, I have to pay salary to my assistants, to people who help me and prepare the games that I'm choosing them on to show you at the webinars. So by the way, this event is also recorded. By the end of the webinar, I think tomorrow, I am going to send you the recording of that event as well as the homework. As for the homework, let me share. So I prepared these two positions. So here your task is to evaluate whether this bishop f7, after which you can play knight g5 and knight e6 and exchange two minor pieces for rook and maybe even two pawns, does make sense or is instead favorable for black. And here you have to evaluate the consequences of knight takes e4. Okay, fine. And let's continue. The next game example, I think, even is more exciting. So look at this position. It's white to move. What would you suggest? Right now, material is equal. Well, we can say that white has more bishops. Well, the white has a bishop pair, black has knights. But what would you suggest? For white, it's white to move. So, Johnny, what's the purpose of bishop d5? Okay, so John suggests bishop b6, queen b6, and knight d5. Interesting. Any other suggestions? Oh, take your time. Okay, so what can I say? Okay, queen g4 and f takes g6. Threatening to take on g6. Okay, that does make sense too, but the problem of queen g4 is that you blunder on knight e5, and then they take your bishop. Bishop e2. Come on, guys. Oh, yes, thanks. Thanks. Finally, John sees this idea. Well, yeah, the queen's position is a bit compromised, and knight e2 traps the queen, right? But let's discuss it. First of all, white has advantage. What kind of advantage they have? Well, they have the attack on the king side. They have two bishops. And they have maybe a better central control. Well, space and the central control, right? And how do they realize their advantage? So they can, let's say, play bishop d5. And if knight takes, then knight takes d5. Oh, actually, no, the pawn takes. Then what to play? So the knight has to move. Well, if they play something like that, then they are in trouble, because after queen e4, it's bishop h6, and they have two pieces hanging. Maybe they may not take, but continue with knight d4. But if so, you can play knight e2, and after queen c5, you can take advantage of a pin, right? Okay, maybe that was a wrong move, and instead this should be played. But now rook f4 traps the queen. So some exchanges has to be played first, and then knight a2 or something like that after. But knight a2 was played immediately, and with this move, white lost all their advantage. So you can ask me, how is it possible? It's a queen, it's a winning the queen move. Well, yes, but you no longer have these benefits, and instead black overtakes initiative and tries to coordinate their minor pieces. That's the problem. So yes, it was knight c4. Knight takes there, knight takes e3, queen moves, and knight takes f1. Knight takes c6. So if b takes c6, it's rook f1, so queen versus rook and bishop, which means white is winning. But black plays this move, which ruins the pawn structure. And this intermediate move makes a lot of sense. So here it seems that white wins the queen, but the pieces left on the board are so useless. There is no attack on the king anymore. That's why the queen is not as powerful as it could be. This is a weakness. This is a weakness. And just doing something like that also attacks the pawn on e4. And even g3 can be attacked. The king is not safe, actually. Well, we don't have much material to attack the king, but we can deliver several checks and the king can get into trouble. What white tries to do is he tries to hope for the passed pawns. He sacrifices and then plays a5. That was a mistake, because this pawn will be stopped anyway. c5, so a very nice pawn chain. Rook a2, defending there, maybe threatening to do a blockade with b3. Bishop e5, attacking there. Queen c4. So sacrificing another pawn. Was it possible to not lose this pawn and continue with g4? Yes, but in such a case, c4 works, because if queen c4, then rook fc8 threatens with checkmate on c1. Well, of course, it's possible to play queen f1 and avoid it, but then with b3, rook c2, and doubling your rooks, you're likely to win. Let's say this, rook a1, bishop b2, and then rook c1 is coming. So bishop b2, this move, but then rook c2. No, not rook c2. Let's say, yeah, let's say bishop a5, rook b3, rook a5. Because of the back rank weakness, definitely black is playing for a win. So that's why this pawn was sacrificed. Queen c4. Bishop takes g3, b3. And now you see, actually, black already has material advantage. So they can stop the pawn, and the position looks like a fortress. That's why the queen cannot demonstrate all her value and take advantage of the king's weakness, for example, or attack these coordinated pieces, because here all black pieces are well coordinated and can be protected. Rook fb8, king g1, bishop g7. This bishop goes to e5 then. For example, if queen d3, bishop goes to e5, bishop d4 check, g4 just h6. And this is approximately equal position. King f1 was played instead. Rook a7. Well, with the idea of putting pressure on this pawn. This. King f3. Well, we can say that the position is equal, but white doesn't have any winning plan, and because of that, they may lose. So, I mean, they don't have a clear plan what they should do. And how, well, can you imagine a situation like one of the strong players win a queen, and then he wants to, well, take advantage of this extra queen. But there is no winning plan. That's why he starts making mistakes and take a lot of risk and may lose the game. Bishop d4, g4, well, g5, and this is a fortress. a6, bishop goes back. Rook a4, king f6. So here both players should come down and agree to a draw. So there is no way to enter the enemy side because of just king g7 move. King g2, rook h8. This blockade is enough. That's why h5 and opening the position there, invading the enemy camp, is potentially risky. But queen b5, h5, g takes h5. And if you take on h5, then they play queen b8. And it seems that you have to do a perpetual check. So check. If king there, it's another check. So the king has to go to g1. But if it goes to g1, it's just g4, queen a7, and g3. And now this is coming. So probably in order to stop it, rook b4 has to be played. C takes b4, queen goes back. How to play? Oh, let's say e6 just, they play a7. And with rook a2, we can stop this pawn. So if they move the queen, they lose a pawn. If well, what we have to do is just to exchange the pawns in order to draw the game. So this activity with the rook was quite interesting, but this line has to be well calculated. How about b7 instead? B7, you mean with the queen? In which position? Here? No. G takes, rook takes, and then queen b7. Near the end. So where queen b7 you mean, then this, and you lose. So the queen has to cover d4, or maybe no, queen b7, it's game over. Okay, queen e3, then queen e3. What do you mean b7? So a7, yes, but rook a2, and the pawn is stopped. Or instead of, no, g7. No, I didn't get it. G2 probably you mean. So queen e3, g2. This is what you mean. But how do you progress? Because you cannot play rook h1, I'll take it. And you also block the rook, so what you have to do is this, but then I just capture the pawn. No, g2 doesn't work. Okay, so g4 was played instead of rook h5. And this is where white made a mistake. They should continue with queen b6, attacking the rook, which probably means that this rook has to go back and it's still a draw. But they played h6, trying to distract the rook. Well, they did distract, but blundered it. Now the pawn is on g4, and it means that black is one tempo ahead, comparing to the previous line where white was able to draw the game. So now queen b8, rook h2, king f1, and g3. So king g1 wouldn't help neither, because then it's bishop d4. And this time, if you capture there, it's just rook a6, and the rook comes that way. So king f1, g3. Now, white has to take, but still white requires a lot of tempi. Because if white takes right away, it's g2, king g1 to stop it. Well, king f2, bishop d4. But even if king g1, it's still bishop d4. King takes, which is the only move. Promotion, king h3, and after bishop f5, they had to resign. Well, queen g3 is unstoppable. King h4 means that queen g3 and then queen g5. It's game over. But here I wanted you to realize that after this mass exchange, actually the black's position is not worse, because white cannot take advantage of having the queen in this position, and instead of the benefits that they originally had, such as an attack on the king, two bishops, control over the space and the center, this time they lost all of them. Well, they have the queen, but cannot fully take advantage of having the queen versus rook and bishop. And these are targets. Okay, fine. So bishop f4 instead of taking the rook. Bishop f4 instead of taking the rook. In which line? Okay, probably somewhere like that, right? Then e5, they can sacrifice. If bishop f5, just rook a4, and they cover these squares. Okay, so good point from Peter, that we should go slower. What do you think, guys? Should we analyze the game slower? Slower would help. Okay. Okay, fine. So next time. Also, I would like to change the format of our webinars. Next time, there will be an event on Sunday, but I will slightly change it and call it a masterclass. You are welcome to suggest topics. So if you want to suggest a topic, you can message me at tricksofchess@gmail.com. So also, I'm going to share the homework with you. Okay, conversion of advantage. Okay, I think I did something like that. Okay, this is a homework for you. Yeah, also, if you have friends that would like to learn chess, you can also invite them to this webinar. Just let them register. I'll show you where. Chess Lance.com. So this is the link. This is the link to register for the webinar. Just send them, and then they are likely. So this is where they can register. I'm sharing the screen now. And then they will get an email with a Zoom link, and this is how they will receive future notifications regarding next webinars or workshops or master classes. So I will slightly change the format, but well, yes, we will go slower. Don't worry. I think, yes, it will be more understandable in such a case. Okay, fine. So again, if you want to donate, this is the link for you. So we are done for today. You can find this link in the chat. Any questions, anything you want to share? If not, we are going to finish right away. Also, yes, one more thing. So I realized that Chess World has a very interesting offer. So this offer. So it offers 5 of my courses at a very affordable price. Well, if you want, you can also purchase it. Also, I'm going to to record another course. And if you want, you can suggest a topic. I'm thinking about Grunfeld for Black. And also I'm thinking of how to improve your ability to play Blitz, because this is what I'm working myself at the moment. And I reached already some progress. That's why I think I can share. So King's Indian, okay. King's Indian for Black, probably. Okay, well, let it be Grunfeld. I think Grunfeld is better if we are talking about the openings, because some of my students play it. Okay, perfect. So thank you for coming. Hope to see everyone next Sunday. Let's finish for today.